Lawrence Pingree. I'm a research vice president for SACR. It's great to be with the PAN team today. Uh, I recently published a unified agentic defense platform note, which ranked you guys pretty high, looking at the convergence between data security, DLP, and be able to control data uploading and downloading from AI, as well as the agentic visibility and workload visibility that we need for the future. So with that, I'd like to kind of turn it over to you, introduce yourselves, and then tell me a little bit about what's going on in Palo Alto land with AIRS and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Lawrence, good to see you as always.
Yeah.
So Scott Simkin, VP of Cortex here at Palo Alto Networks, thinking about all things security operations, cloud security, and MDR, incident response and threat intel.
Yep. Ian Swanson, I lead AI security for Palo Alto Networks. And so that really covers, the development, the product, but really what is it that we're delivering to secure all of our customers' agentic workflows and really driving, security around that autonomous enterprise. So I lead Prism AIRS.
Love it. Love it. So tell me what's going on in AIRS land. I mean,
Yeah. So Prism AIRS, we just announced this week what we call 3.0. And so it's the third kind of evolution. And as we're walking around Cyber Week, you see agents everywhere.
Yes.
Every single billboard's talking about agents. And we're kind of moving to this next evolution of AI that talks to AI that actually does actions.
That's
on
right.
that side. And so Prisma AIRS is all about how do we take all the great stuff to secure AI applications to artifacts like models and now apply that to the autonomous enterprise to secure agents in production.
I like it. Now, one of the concepts I introduced recently was this notion of just-in-time trust. And what I realized when I was looking across all of the different vendors in what we call UADP is that they're all extracting intent. And they're applying that extracted intent to a policy structure, which includes the context of the interaction, the user, the identity, all of these things. But I also realized that intent could be, kind of intent intelligence. So my thought process on that note was, how do we deliver permissions and, privileges and make sure that they're not standing privileges in the environment when maybe either a user or an agent or even a series of agents give each other instructions?
I think there's a couple things that you teased out there. One is, what are the essential building blocks to secure these workloads?
Yeah.
And a very clear building block is around identity. So whether that's, the non-human identity, the just-in-time, how do we think about user identities within these agentic workflows? And then surrounding that is the intent, the context of these workloads. If we know what they're capable of doing, meaning the tools they can do, can they just read a database or can they delete a database? We could start to build guardrails and real boundaries from understanding, yes, the identity, the permissions, but also to what it's capable of doing. And that's when we could get into really precise protections on these workloads.
So I think it's fascinating. Yeah.
Building on that, right? Other side of the equation, what's an adversary doing with an AI agent? Ooh, right? And what we found, so I asked Unit 42, our threat intel.
Okay.
I said, imagine the future. What are they going to do today and in the next 6 and 12 months? They figured out, they stood up about half dozen AI agents. They gave them names, of course, because, we're
It makes it more
nerds.
fun.
It makes it more fun. It's like, we all love sci-fi.
Yeah.
But altogether, they created, ran, and orchestrated a ransomware attack in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is mind-blowing. It used to take
is
hours and
mind-blowing.
hours and hours.
Yeah.
So what do we do? From a defense side, if you didn't have AI agents at your back, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I agree.
And your question, identity, permissions, is just as important when you're building AI agents for good. And you have, how do I do automation?
That's right.
Right? How do I do what used to be SOAR,
Yes.
but is now agentic?
Yep.
And the most critical thing, in my opinion, is guardrails, like you said, permission management, access control, and having a system that you can trust.
Absolutely.
We've seen what happens when you let AI agents run rampant.
Yeah.
And actually, so I will bring up that we're looking at this new concept we're thinking about, which is how would the workload side evolve a little bit here? And we're kind of thinking that we need to shift right in the workload side, which is more to runtime, more to bring context to the workload. And I use the analogy of, a lot of workloads, especially unprotected workloads, they really don't have good visibility. Like if you enter a room, you have your eyeballs, you can see the room. A lot of workloads are isolated. They're kind of isolating and they're executing in that isolation. So I like the idea of sort of federating the context for the workload to understand the environment more. Tell me what you guys are doing there.
So I'll let you cover
Yeah.
what we're thinking for runtime, but really, I mean, listen, we've talked about this
Yeah.
and had spirited debates, but I think cloud security, workload protection,
Yep,
it's time for a hard shift right.
I agree.
Too long, we've been sitting there thinking about posture.
I know.
Posture just tells you so many red flags. What's wrong? I'm tired of hearing what's wrong.
Yeah.
I actually want a solution to do something for me to prevent an attack. So when you look at the workload as an atomic unit, you say, what's an adversary trying to do? They're trying to get in.
Yeah.
And if you stop an attack in runtime, the shift right, you actually have time to do the shift left to resolve all those issues, attack paths, vulnerabilities, et cetera. So, you know, it's my opinion that CNAP 2.0, where it's going, is going to be really founded upon runtime.
Yep.
Posture is always going to be important, but you've got to evolve.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I would say that from what I'm hearing from, I think even Pan Research Labs, it's like what, 5 to 15 minutes from vulnerability disclosure to exploitation.
Yeah.
And
It's just rapid in terms of the advancement there.
yeah, and and so to me, when I was in my past analyst role, and now I'm a big proponent of runtime, and I'll tell you why. I think that once we, if we use like the airport analogy, once somebody goes through the security checkpoint, the reason there's cameras in the room is so that you can characterize if they start going off the rails, right? And so I think the new sort of, motion forward is how do we build more model around these malicious tool uses, the behavior or the expected behavior of agents. How's Pan tackling that?
What's interesting about this is we can build better runtime protections by the information we learn on the left, from the posture.
That's right.
And so especially as we think about agents, we have the capabilities within Prism AIRS to behaviorally test agentic workflows. It's looking through all the artifacts and it's starting to unpack things like, what is the system prompt? What are the instructions, if you will? What are the tools that it has access to, the skills? What are the things that it could possibly do that we discover here a little bit more on the left as these targets and these systems are being stood up, but then we can start to dynamically write policies on the right. And I think that is critical because one of the challenges, at least as it relates to AI threats, is you have non-deterministic actions. You're trying to identify to near perfect element to say, is this a malicious actor or is it not? But if we can break down the workload of what's happening at runtime with all the context that we get, we're then able to build more precise detectors that can be customized at the user level, the use case level, and the customer level. And that brings it to almost deterministic level of how we're able to protect. So I think all these things working in concert is what's incredibly important, at least for end-to-end AI security.
I would agree with you. I think so a couple of years back, I introduced this concept of preemptive cyber. And part of that was I examined the entire stack and then I realized, okay, we need more modeling efforts. And that's really emerging in things like, automated pen testing with Agentics. And so we can use that as a preemptive data source for characterizing behaviors. And even myself, I've had AI go off the rails. I'll tell you a quick story about that. So I'm a big Linux guy, and I was having Agentics, drive my command line. And, I told it just some simple instructions. Hey, monitor these certain directories, system directories. And the agent decided, well, I'm going to change the permission of those because that's a good best practice.
Yep.
And now I can no longer have privileges. So I mean, you can have the right intent sometimes at the user level, and then sometimes the agent decides with its probabilistic nature, well, this might be a better thing to do. How do you deal with those kinds of things?
Well, one thing that could have happened in your particular use case is as you give the agentic workload the goal, what to do based on your initial prompt, it might have went out and researched, how do I accomplish this goal?
Exactly.
So it's looking perhaps at the open web, and what we see is something we would call an indirect prompt injection attack that is happening from an outside source. So it's not you trying to attack from your initial prompt.
Right.
it's what it researched. It was researching something that can inject in that workflow to actually do something that is malicious on that side.
Yeah, and search results can vary, right? I mean, so you have
Completely.
sometimes your search might produce one solution, and then other time it might produce another.
We've seen over and over again these skills when you're in cloud code or otherwise, when it goes out on the internet, people are now creating whole classes of information
Yeah.
for an AI agent to learn from,
Yeah.
to then bring a malicious skill into the environment.
Wow.
On purpose.
Wow.
We have threat research that points definitively to this. I think it was, I saw a vendor, it was 13.4% of all skills were malicious.
Wow.
That's
I mean, that's
massive.
kind of scary.
Massive.
That's great you mentioned that, because I heard another story,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to validate this, but I will say that I heard the story, read the article about agents being placed in an environment in kind of a simulated enterprise, and asked to do benign activities, review email, maybe write a document, things
Not
like that.
deleted database.
Not delete a database. But they did decide to start becoming malicious. And so there's a lot of people, I think, concerned about that.
So one key point there is, as we're seeing these threats, where those threats lie, and this kind of goes a little bit to your shift, right? It lies in the communication.
Yeah.
And then it tries to figure out what is possible,
Yeah.
which is a little bit of where we scan the artifacts, where we see the risk within it, how we understand the intent and the context and the tools. All those things in concert is where we can actually stop what happened possibly to you.
Right.
We're able to stop that at runtime in real time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's incredibly key for customers is this area is moving incredibly fast.
Yeah.
The artifacts are expanding. How do we scan those artifacts for risk? How do we behaviorally test these systems? And then how do we secure it at runtime?
Yeah. So the earlier point that was made about, the left side, and by the way, this is not a political thing, but I will say that, the left side, you have CSPM, and you also have DSPM
That's right.
and data visibility. The reason that I looked at the convergence of those factors is that, for example, if an agent was told to go access the database, having the preemptive knowledge or classification of that data, now it can associate that with a data handling practice. And to me, that's the way to kind of constrain and govern the potential, exfil locations. Like, for example, go ahead.
Yeah. No, listen, you've got to bring them together.
Yeah.
So just because we're talking about shift right,
Yes.
shift left is still important.
Yes.
Because you have endless vulnerabilities and things like embedded secrets.
Yeah.
It's just, you're never going to get ahead.
I agree.
But we've just focused too much on that. The industry spent too many years exclusively thinking about shift left and not how do you be best in both?
Yep.
And then, you made a point, put the context together.
Yep.
And then you have a good priority, you have good understanding, you
Yep.
can understand what the adversary is trying to do, and you can figure out, let's enforce a real-time protection with high precision. It's not going to bring down a production application used by millions of users.
I agree.
So here's a key word that's
Yeah,
not
go ahead.
being said, but I think we're talking about it, which is this platform approach. And as we think of a platform is just not about procurement, how people buy and buy multiple solutions in an easy way.
Yeah.
It's about best in breed products working together to solve a major problem or challenge.
Agreed.
And so that's why, like, I had a startup, Protect AI, that was acquired by Palo Alto Networks this past July. And one of the things that made me really excited about coming in Palo Alto was all the capabilities that we can start to glean from everything that Palo Alto touches.
Yeah.
And I think only with that complete context can you really secure these workloads end to end.
I agree. And I was thinking in DLP land. So, like, if you behaviorally profile an agent, let's say that's responsible for, let's call it financial reporting, maybe every month it emails so-and-so. What you could then do by having dynamic privileges and awareness of intent is you can lock it down. Only so-and-so will get that email, nobody else.
It's preventing non-deterministic behavior.
That's right.
That is unexpected and unwanted.
Yep.
So on data and AI, just something that keeps knocking around my head. I think there's a world of, I'm going to call it dark data, right? There's a world of dark data that is being produced by and exclusively used by AI agents and agentic tools.
Yep.
I believe, gosh, next 1, 2, 3 years, the amount of dark data in the enterprise is going to far outstrip the amount of known, human identified, human understood data. When that happens, the data is once again a critical point of you have to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional DLP, DSPM, et cetera, tools, they're not built for agentic data.
Yeah.
They're not built to understand it. They're not built to understand where it is. And they're not built, in your example, to control it
Mm-hmm.
when there's no human in the loop. So taking that forward, this is an opportunity to say, if dark data is a problem, what do we do about it? I think there's emerging solutions out there that are taking that platform approach to data protection that we can, both from an AI side and a more traditional enterprise side, that can deliver a solve.
I agree. I think all of us have thrown data into an AI chat interface and like asked it to tell me what this data is or tell me some insights. And what's the beauty of that is that if you do have unstructured data, it can tell you a story. And so the other thing that's also dark is, if on endpoints or workloads you have secrets being used, you can kind of discover that stuff, and then you can go after cleaning it up or having an agentic remediation process.
So endpoint, you said the critical one I've been waiting for is end of the day. Listen, the endpoint is where adversaries operate. It's the final battleground. We know this. It's been like that forever. That's why EDR came about. I think over the last, year or two, the role of the endpoint has seemingly been lower. Everything's in the cloud. Everything's AI.
Yeah.
But we're at a moment where do developers operate with agentic tools? It's the endpoint.
Yep.
Right?
That's right.
Where do agentic data flows happen? Honestly, the endpoint. So I think we're ready to call it, listen, is this now the agentic endpoint?
Yep.
Front door into the enterprise.
Yep.
And if it's the agentic endpoint, guess what? Traditional EDR can't see non-binary software. IAM cannot determine that, this is an AI agent inheriting the permissions of the developer that's using Cloud Code or Cursor or Windsurf, take your pick. That's a blind spot.
I agree.
When there's a new attack surface, when there's a new blind spot, of course, what do we have to do? We have to find a new solution. So end of the day, we've been spending a lot of time, at least here at Palo Alto Networks, both with, you can speak to Prisma Airs, but how does the endpoint evolve with agentic endpoint security? We now intend to acquire a company called Koi not too long ago that we're really excited about.
It is. And that to me is all about, characterizing the endpoint with more context, right? So it's about discovering, well, is there Cloud Code there? Is there?
And that discovery is key. Like when I've met with a lot of CISOs this week and they're wanting to talk about shadow AI. It's a buzz term. And a lot of them initially think shadow AI being, how are my employees consuming and using AI, through the browser and elsewhere. And it's like, there's also shadow AI that sits at the endpoint and at the local machine. And yes, you might have a coding assistant that lives there, but then there's also the skills, the MCP servers, all these things that need to be discovered, but then also evaluate the communication that's happening. We need to also validate the supply chain to say, have we scanned these artifacts to even say, are they safe as they're being used?
That's right.
So it's really interesting to see how all of these core terms that, quite frankly, we've been doing for 10, 20 plus years in cybersecurity are coming together to really solve what is a very difficult problem.
It's kind of beautiful to see, though. We've been in this. I've been in this game for almost 30 years, and it is beautiful to see these new, the things that we thought of back way, years past, sort of coming to fruition.
I remember talking to you in a past life about the firewall.
I remember,
and I kind of go back to that time. In the early days of Palo Alto Networks, what was our claim to fame? Our claim to fame was we had the insight that SaaS apps were here. Right? Many other things as well, but what our original insight is, okay, if the business is adopting SaaS apps, security can't say no.
Right.
So much like Agentic, you have to see everything.
And
not just, is there a SaaS app? Is it Workday or Salesforce or whatever have you? What are the functional component parts of that app? So at a granular level, you can understand what it can do, what data it can access, how to control it. Sound familiar?
That does.
This is exactly what's happening on the endpoint today.
And it's driven by NIST. I think if you talk to a lot of CISOs, they're looking at it like, well, I've got to have my inventory. That's my NIST 101.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So
on the SaaS app side that you brought up, we're even just this week we announced partnerships with ServiceNow. They have something called Control Tower. People can build very elegant agentic workflows on it. One of the tenets I have in my team is how do we bring security to where people do AI? And a lot of people are doing AI you know, not just within their enterprise, not just on the local
Yep.
device, they're doing it within SaaS vendors as well.
That's right.
And so we're having to take our security capabilities and natively push them into all of these popular SaaS vendors. And that shines a light on the discovery, but also the communications, you know, that's happening there. It provides the context and allows us to put inline defenses, even all within the SaaS vendor landscape.
That's actually why I actually, there were two things that I heavily weighted when I was looking at, you know, unified and agentic defense platform. It is the ability to do runtime, and then also the extent to which you have breadth of visibility. And so AISPM is something that people are looking at a lot, right? And they want to understand, well, if I have all these agents configured in my SaaS and my what have you, my AI services, how are they configured? Are they configured properly? We have the same, we used to call it configuration management.
That's right.
But you know, that same problem, it just repeats itself as the new attack surface evolves.
And
so,
you know, you mentioned AISPM. So listen, I get to talk to a tremendous amount of customers using our cloud security. And I have to say, I think it's a secret weapon for us. AISPM and DSPM, out of all the posture controls in cloud, if you get those right, you have an absolutely outsized advantage. So it's one of the areas we're really looking at is how do we continue to advance state of the art for exactly the reasons you said. If you're not there controlling data, controlling permissions or posture for AI apps and the enterprise data stores in cloud, you're not gonna be able to do anything.
I would agree. Any other things that or thoughts?
I mean, my headline and what's amazing to see here at Cyber Week is I remember 2021, no one was talking about AI security.
Yeah, that's right.
I was in a room with 13 people and I went up to the mic and I asked the researchers and they're like, we don't know. Last year, everywhere was AI security. Now it's all about agents. And whenever I meet with a CISO, the headline that I keep receiving is, hey, we need to move fast. We have 1 foot on the gas pedal, but 1 foot on the brake. And we need to calibrate that because we need to be an enabler. And they're looking at us as a partner for that. Not as a vendor, but as a partner of how we enable this next iteration of reducing operational costs with AI, building better customer experiences with AI. So it really is, there should be no AI in any enterprise without security of AI. But our goal is to be that partner to enable all these advancements. And it's been a tremendous series of questions and talks. And this event, just seeing the evolution on this topic in the last 3 years has been extraordinary.
Yeah. My takeaway here is that I mean, I think you guys are really on the right path for my vision of the future. And you know that I always raise the bar every time. So
yes.
But
We know that.
you know, I'm an idealist. In
You
security.
challenge us and we appreciate that.
But you know, thank you very much for your time today. It's been wonderful. And you know, that's all the questions I have. So
Thank you.
thank you
Lawrence.
guys.
Appreciate it.